I'm joined by Paul Hoffert. Welcome to the second annual Canadian International Television Festival. It's an honor for you to be here.
It's great to be here, and I'm glad that you're having a television festival. It's great that it's the second, and I hope that there's many more, because not only is television a very important medium that most people know,
Right.
but Canadian television goes back, and it was really interesting looking at the, I guess it was a videotape of the show that we did in 1970,
Right.
and remembering how high the quality of Canadian production was. One of the things that I was chatting with Hart Pomerantz about
Yes.
when we kind of were just like, watching the screening, was that we had a fantastic advantage, not just Lorne and Hart and Paul Hoffert, but all the people who were young and working at the CBC then in television. The CBC was developing young talent, so they put us on the air.
Right.
But they put us on the air on network television. And it never occurred to any of us how important that was until we went to the United States, where we realized that in the United States, if you were getting your start on television, you'd be in Tulsa, Oklahoma or something on a local channel, in between the sports feed and the news feed. And when people found out that I had been on network television, that I had been a musical director of network television shows, it was really helpful in Hollywood and New York and all of those kind of places. It was a good thing to have on your resume.
Right.
So it was a golden age of Canadian television, and there was very little censorship. They really went. Most of us as artists were really young.
Yeah, well, and the band itself, when you guys appeared on the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hour, like, you were still relatively new.
Yeah, sure. It was actually, Lighthouse was well known in Canada.
Right.
And we had done 3 albums in the States, but they didn't really sell that well. The subsequent album, right after we did this show, that was our first gold album, and then we had some gold and platinum albums in the United States as well. But but in Canada we were doing that, and even before Lighthouse, I got my start on CBC doing television when I was 16 years old, along with Gordon Lightfoot, Tommy Ambrose, and a bunch of other people that some people just thought, oh, these guys have some talent, let's give them a show.
Right.
And they gave us a show. The show was called While We're Young. I mean, we were a young talent.
Yeah.
And then within a year or two, I was doing 3 or 4 different CBC television shows and everything like that. So it's great. Television's a great medium. We're in another great golden age of television now, but I think the 60s and 70s in Canada was really a wonderful time when Canada was doing world-class stuff.
Yeah. And how has Canadian television influenced Lighthouse since?
Well, actually, it hasn't really influenced Lighthouse since. It's influenced us individual people in Lighthouse who watch television, and we all watch different things in television. But I wouldn't say, I think at the time, it had an enormous influence on all of us. On the particular Hart and Lorne show that we saw today, it was a good example, because not only were we the guest artists along with James Taylor, that's kind of nice too, but of course, James Taylor was great at the time, but he wasn't like James Taylor, right? But then we played an original theme song. We had to play the music in between the acts, and nobody thought to say, oh, this isn't cool, or it's not what we do, or anything like that. You just, like, it was a gig, and you went there, and it was like one of a lot of gigs. Like, sometimes Lighthouse we did the background movie scores for all kinds of films, industrial films, documentaries, not all feature films, although some of those. And it was a community that we had that was not only a great musical community, of course, with Yorkville and Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and all those people, and Lighthouse and all of us who were kind of coming up at the same time, but there was a television community. And it started out with bringing some British people who had done television in Britain. But very quickly, the people who were running the Canadian government CBC network basically just promoted Canadians and gave us the chance to do stuff. So it was very exciting, and it was exciting because it were unlike today when everything's like really formatted, and there are all kinds of rules and restrictions and stuff like that.
And you kind of lose sight of the creativity with that too.
You lose sight of the creativity. I mean, in those days, you could just like basically have an idea and
just go with it.
And you'd go with it. And there was no pre-taping usually. No. Usually it was live to tape.
Right.
And so like,
and that also created more authenticity too, right? And you got the more realism and.
Absolutely, it created more authenticity, and also there was no ability, like if somebody said a bad word, which we usually didn't, but I mean, or if something slipped by.
Something just slipped out.
It
slipped out.
It was out.
Yeah.
And also nobody could even, it would be hard to prove it because nobody had VCR, so nobody recorded it. So somebody would have to go and say, did you see that show? Did you see that? And if you didn't see the show,
you missed it.
And it was the end of it. It was just gone, you know. So it was a very different time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. How do you think audiences have changed?
Oh, audiences have changed really a lot. People used to have to, in order to see one of the shows, like the Hart and Lawrence show, one would have had to been available at that particular time that the show was on, and interested in watching
it,
and have that channel
ready.
And so the audiences were, one would think, much smaller, and yet I would do a television show on this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
And the next day, people would call me. I'd see people in you know, just like in networking around town, and people would say, I saw you on the whatever it was, Hart and Lawrence show, whatever the show was that I was doing, Country Hoedown.
Yeah.
And I always thought, don't these people have a life? Like, are they like if people just like watching TV, waiting for
TV lovers just sit and watch TV, and that's what's great about it.
I guess, yeah, it was kind of fun.
How do you think comedy has evolved over the times?
Well, you know, I was speaking with Hart about that, and I don't think it's evolved really that much. I think like musical styles, like everything else, change. But with music, what's happened with popular music is when you had, say, hip-hop and rap come in and that kind of thing, there's a pretty fundamental change in the way the art is structured. You know what I mean? Like there's no melody, there's no harmony, there's other things, right? But I think comedy is really a generic thing. It crosses, there's cultural little highlights that you like to pick up on.
Right.
But, you know, when I was in China and I see Chinese comedians, you know, on the radio, you know, if you go to a live radio show or watch them on TV or go in the theater, and I'd ask my Chinese friends what they were doing. They were doing Abbott and Costello. They were doing everything just Chinese.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot about comedy that's just the human experience, and that the basic structure of what makes people laugh.
Well, and also comedy, like, you don't have to be speaking for it to be funny, right?
Course,
you can see comedy in the facial expressions or in the gestures, and like what you were saying about people in China too. Yeah, it could have been dubbed, but it still doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Final question for you.
Yes.
What advice do you have for people today who are trying to get into the business, albeit the music, film, or television industry?
Well, it's just one answer. So if you're thinking of getting into the music, film, or television industry, the entertainment industry, basically everything is totally different about the business. And the main thing that's different is that when I got started, you could be an artist. You could do either comedy or music or whatever it was. And there was a whole infrastructure of writers and producers and mostly marketers and promo people and media people who basically worked with you, and they became your agents, different kind of agents. And they basically looked after all this other stuff. And you could just do what you did, you know. If I wanted to record something, I would go into a recording studio, and there were recording studios, and there were studio musicians, and
you just did what you want.
And there were copyists. There were copyists. And now you have to kind of do it yourself. And if you're not the kind of creative person who also is interested in looking after your business interests, then I really think you should just be an artist hobbyist. because nowadays you really have to understand how to market yourself. You have to understand this whole thing that I never even knew that this word applied to people, which was a brand.
Right. There's the whole
So
business
now the
and
whole thing
marketing
is
side
the
to
business,
it.
the brand. You have to figure out what differentiates you. And one of the reasons is when before the web was really important, before 15 years ago, the number of people who could make a recording that was available commercially or a television program for sure was really small because it took a lot of money, it took all this other expertise, and people couldn't do it. Now with user-generated content, with UGC, now with everybody having a handycam, now with YouTube,
you can do it.
Everybody does it. So the bigger problem that you have if you want to get into the business is there's so much more stuff.
Right.
There's millions of things that are done like every week.
Right.
And we didn't have to compete as much as you have to compete. So my advice to everybody is whatever the particular creativity part of the business you want to go into, whether it's writing or music or visual arts, if you go to sleep and get up, and if in the music part, unless there are melodies going through your head that you can't get rid of, and unless you can not imagine having a life unless you created music, you shouldn't go into the business.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this. It's been an honor, and I wish you all the best. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more interviews from the 2014 Canadian International Television Festival's Red Carpet.